Thank you. Good morning. I'm Paul Karch, and I'm going to start off with just a couple of slides, and then there's lots of pictures here, so if anybody wants to move up closer, you can. So we're really going to have three stories today. It's going to be stories of three different families and three different dupers and how they have made the transition to adulthood and where they are now. So you'll see here, first, Terry Gray is going to talk about Spencer, and then Nicole is going to talk about Karina, and then Ann and I, mostly Ann, are going to talk about Rachel. So as you listen to these stories, so this is mostly going to be specific stories as opposed to generalities, but I'm going to start off with some generalities to help you sort of think about these stories and how they might apply to you. And these are kind of the big picture concepts that we took a while to learn while we were doing the transition that I think are important. The first one is, although when you transition to adulthood, the important center of support for your child and family changes from the school to adult services. And although you all probably know that schools there's a great variety between cities and school districts and between states, there's variety in schools, but there are also some things in common because there are federal statutes that apply and schools tend to be organized in similar ways. When you get to adult services, the variety gets much wider and wilder. Every state is different. Some states run it through counties. They're all different. And so when you listen today, a specific question of, well, how did you get this particular support? We're happy to answer it, but it may not help in your situation. You may have to figure out how that works in where you live. So one of the things that confused me for a while, and I may be the only person, but since I have the mic, I'm going to share with you. I'm a lawyer, so when people kept talking about Medicaid waiver, I said, what's being waived? What do you mean Medicaid waiver? That doesn't mean, and when I would ask people, they would go, I don't know, just that's what we call it, Medicaid waiver. Well, I'm here to tell you, I did find out what it means. It means that under Medicaid, which up so far in history is an entitlement, what a person with a severe disability is entitled to is a bed in a nursing home. And for a long time, that's all the feds through the states would pay for Medicaid. And then people started to say, well, that's a bad idea, you know, because not really everybody needs to be in a nursing home, either frail elderly people or people with severe disabilities. So states started to do deals with the feds where they said, hey, we want to use our Medicaid money to support people in their own homes or in the community. And those kinds of programs are called Medicaid waiver programs. So if somebody says, and sometimes even in Wisconsin, we actually have to sign a piece of paper every year that says, we waive our Medicaid right and instead take these services. So that's what that's about. The things that you think about, and this is just kind of a list: home, work, community, health, transportation, recreation. Those things really are not, in our experience, are not that different between high school age and adulthood. But they all should go in, all need to go in somehow, or not all can go in to the plans you work out. And one of the things that I think is more of a trend, it's true in Wisconsin now, but I've heard it is true in other places, is in our system anyway, it helps a lot to think about outcomes. That is to say, Rachel will do better living in a home in the community as opposed to, we want Rachel to live in this house. Because the way our system works, if you make a specific demand for a specific service, they're like, yeah, how does that help Rachel meet her outcomes? You have to, so it's a language game that you have to figure out how to describe things in the way that fit into your system. So I guess that's it. So now we're going to share what we learned and how we sort of dealt with these issues with our children.
Hi, my name is Terry Gray. My name is Terry Gray, and my son Spencer Gray, who's wandering around here somewhere, oh, he's sitting right there. Hi, Spencer. He's 22 years old. He'll be 23 on August 15th, 1984. And what I'm going to do is take you through his, what he's doing now and then how we got there. Anyway, this is a picture of Spencer when he was about 18 years old. His dad took him. He looks very old to me. He looks grown up. And he looks very pensive. And this was always a picture that I really enjoyed. Spencer gets up every morning, and support staff comes to the house that he lives in. He lives in with a family and has his own room, and he pays rent. And I think I went one too far. Okay, support staff comes to the house in the morning and gets him up, puts him in the shower. He washes himself, not real great, but he makes an attempt at it. He washes his hair. They do all their toileting. He gets out, goes into the bathroom. They help him dry himself off, and then he chooses his clothes. He's kind of picky about what he wears sometimes, and he loves to wear sweatpants, whether it's hot or not. He likes sweatpants, and they have to say, no, Spencer, it's the summertime, put some shorts on. But he likes those sweatpants, and they help him put them on, and then he likes his T-shirts. He doesn't like button-down shirts. He calls them jackets, and he'll pull the buttons off. So everything has to be shirts over his head, and they kind of help him do that too. And then they head out to the kitchen, where his favorite breakfast is bacon and eggs, and he'll help them sometimes, but I think he's burnt himself before, so they don't, he likes to help. He likes to do that kind of stuff. Sometimes he'll go into the cupboard and get a donut, or he'll ask for some certain things. Then after breakfast, he'll help him clean the table off, and as you can see, Spencer loves his music, like a lot of our Dupers do, and he's got his earphones on, and he's probably listening to Macarena or the Chicken Dance. Those are his favorite songs, and I like the earphones on because I get tired of listening to them. Anyway, so after breakfast, he helps clean up, and sometimes they do the laundry. If he soiled his sheets, and they'll do the laundry, and Spencer likes putting the laundry in, and then they might go out, and then they head out for the day, and they do a lot of different things. Sometimes they will go shopping. He loves to go shopping. I've gone to Costco with Spencer, and he'll tell me peanut butter, because he loves peanut butter. He'll say diapers, and he'll tell me what we need. And he just loves going to the store. So that's what he does some of the days, and sometimes he'll go swimming. He loves swimming. We gave him swimming lessons from a very young age because he would go to the water, and he would go to a pool, and we were always afraid he was going to jump in. So he has taken swimming lessons, so he does know how to swim. One of the problems is he holds his breath underwater for a really long time, and it freaks people out, like, oh my God, he's going to drown. But he'll eventually come up and put his head back down. And then he loves playing in water. I'm sure a lot of your kids like playing in water, and he loves playing in water. And he loves the ocean, although he goes back and forth with this. Sometimes the noise on the ocean is too much for him. But you can see here, I took him to the ocean one day last year, and he just loved playing in it. He's gone out to watch baseball games, and his caregivers still do that. And as you can see, he looks like he's very interested in what's going on. We were sitting out here, and the baseball game was on, and he's sitting there watching the game, He also loves going to amusement parks, and I think this is Boomers, isn't it? Yeah, this is Boomers. I don't know if you guys know what Boomers is. If you're from California, you might. And it's a little amusement park. Don't they have putt-putt golf and all that kind of stuff? And he actually they have an annual pass to go to Boomers. And they have an annual pass to go to Boomers. They have an annual pass to go to Magic Mountain. He went to Magic Mountain a couple weeks ago, and they stayed for 14 hours. and he loved it. The next day, he could barely get out of bed, but but he loves it, and they take him there quite regularly. He did have season passes at one time to Disneyland. It got a little expensive, and the nice thing about having a season pass to Disneyland is that you can go for like a few hours at a time. It gets really crowded, and it's hard to, and he kind of gets a little upset if he can't get on the rides. One time when he was really little, I took him to Disneyland, and he got on the merry-go-round, and he wouldn't get off, and him and I sat on the merry-go-round for about an hour, going around and around and around, and they let us on. Disneyland's been really great with Spencer. His caregiver took him up to the snow a few years ago, and he loves sledding, and he loves doing all kinds of he's very active. He likes going and doing. He loves bowling. He goes, at one time, he was bowling so much they said he can go for free. And then a new person came in and said, no, he can't go for free. So they got a summer pass this year. So he can go bowling 4 times a week and bowl 3 games a day. And yesterday he wanted to go bowling. He just loves going bowling. And as you can see, he's going to make a strike down there, And he loves it. Did you guys go bowling yesterday? No. They were going to go bowling. Then Will was practicing basketball with him, and as you can see, this ball is going into the net, and some of you saw him throwing a ball. He just throws the ball and throws the ball and throws the ball, and he can do it for hours and hours, and he can actually make that basket. I saw it. Matter of fact, I took this picture. I was amazed that he could do that. Spencer also loves going to the zoo, and I think these are zoo pictures, and he loves going to the zoo, and they have season passes to go to the LA Zoo. So they can go and do this stuff all day long. He loves restaurants. He's looking at the menu like he's reading it. Well, the menu's really upside down, but he looks very mature and very like he's going to decide exactly what he wants to eat. He doesn't have to look at the menu to tell you a hamburger and French fries. And when we do go to restaurants, if the food doesn't come really fast and the waitress goes by, he'll like sit there and stare, like follow the waitress, like where's that waitress going? His dad had a motorcycle, and his dad would take him around the block, and he just loved the motorcycle. And I don't think they ride on it now, but he will. If he hears a motorcycle going down the street, he'll say motorcycle. We try different things with Spencer, and one of the things that from a very young age, he liked to do a lot of the things that he does now, and so we took him. They took him out to see the horses, and he didn't want anything to do with them. He has to go to the doctors he has to go get put out to have his teeth cleaned, and the support staff helps bring him out to the doctors, and as you can see, he's not a happy camper there. This is 2 of his support staff. He actually has 5 people that take care of him for 24 hours every day, and these are 2 of the guys that he's with. They're all males. This is Spencer and myself. Spencer doesn't stay the night with me because I can't. He really is too much for me. His dad and I are divorced, and he does see his dad once or twice a month. His dad has a Jeep, and he loves riding in the Jeep with his dad. And I just wanted to go over how we got here. Spencer's, like I said, he's 22 years old. When he was 18, number one, in California, we have the regional centers. So Spencer was a client of the regional center from birth. And he continued to this day to be a client of the regional centers. And if any of you are California residents, you definitely need to be a client of the regional center. Your child needs to be a client of the regional center. And they will follow him through the rest of his life. So like was mentioned earlier, the school kind of takes care of a lot of the things until they get out of school. In California, the, the regional center tried to insist that he go to school till he was 22, even though I wanted to take him out at 18 for funding reasons. They insisted on that. But finally, at 20 years old, 21 years old, he got out of school and started into this new program. Now, when your child's 18 years old, there's a couple things that you get. What we got for him was Social Security, and the Social Security pays for his living expenses. That we have in California, part of the Medicaid program, and also Spencer's on Medi-Cal and has been on Medi-Cal, and is in-home health services. In in-home health services, he got some hours before he was 18, and after he was 18, I think he has over 200 hours of in-home health services, and it's for domestic and protection. So it's a really great program in California. In any of these things, if you want to know a little bit more about them, come and talk to me. So those are the three things that now that he's 18 years old, he has. One of my recommendations is when they're 18 years old, get a conservatorship, because it makes life so much easier. A lot of people don't do it, and there's a way that you can do it in California through the regional center where it doesn't cost any money at all. So then the next question is going to be, and then, so after he got out of school, he was 21 years old, we got him into the PALS program. What PALS does for us is they hire all the support staff, they follow through on the doctors, and they coordinate with the support staff to get him to all the places that he needs to be. And then we have quarterly meetings with the regional center, which I attend. Anyway, in today we're still looking for an adult program that fits his needs. I mean, he is pretty busy, but there are some things that maybe we could add to his program. And anyway, so Spencer is living a life beyond my wildest dreams. I had no idea that this was out there until the moment came that the decision had to be made. It was presented to me. And he has grown so much, he has matured so much. I was telling someone, when he's with me, he acts like a baby, I treat him like one probably. And but when he's with his support staff, all the guys that he's with, he steps up to the plate, and he listens to them. He doesn't listen to me. Anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Nicole Cleary. And before I get started, I want to recognize my partner in crime, Tim Cleary, who has been the best partner you could ask for in creating the dream that we have created for Karina. So I'm going to start by talking about person-centered planning. Karina's journey really started, actually, let me back up a little bit, started in 2009. I was working, supporting 6 group homes in Portland. I was coordinating services across them. And what I saw in those 6 homes was that it was really difficult to maintain quality of life for our clients. The staff turned over all the time. We were only able to offer minimum wage to the staff. So there was just no consistency for the clients, and I worried, and I said, oh my gosh, if this is gonna be Karina's future, I'm not comfortable having so many possible variations that are gonna affect her care. So I said to Tim, you know what, Tim, I really want us to figure out a way to get Karina to a supported living situation. That was a new model that I had just learned about. And so that was 2009 was when we started really working on this dream. So it's now 2017, and Karina's been living that dream for 6 months. So we started really at the end of high school in Oregon, just like Terry was saying. People in many states, they like to keep your kids in the school system till 21 because the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act guarantees them a free and appropriate public education until 21. So what that looks like in Oregon is she went from high school to a transition program called Community Transition Program. And as part of the transition from high school to CTP, we did what was called person-centered planning, and hopefully all of you are doing person-centered planning. It's a really great moment in time when you bring together everyone in her life. Her family, her friends, her support workers, her case manager, her teachers, everyone comes together. And they really spend some time, it took like, I think 4 or 5 hours, to identify what are Karina's strengths and what really works for her. Also, what doesn't work for her, and what are our family's dreams for her, and what are the definite, concrete next steps to get to that dream. So this was the beginning of us really focusing on defining what the vision was for Karina's adulthood. The community, or the person-centered planning process also got her team really engaged on our focused goals, which at that time were building friendships and independent communication. Karina's nonverbal, so her being able to like even just this, yes and no, that was huge, and we've worked for years to get her to have a defined yes and no. So step by step, we created this home. And our vision for her adulthood was that Karina would live in a home of her own, preferably with her own friends. And this is her friend Alicia, who she lives with, has been her friend since freshman year of high school. Our vision is that Karina will have a network of friends who she enjoys spending time with, that she will be able to choose her own support staff, that she will have a schedule of daily activities that she enjoys, and that her medical needs will be well supported so that she's healthy and thriving. So really take some time as parents to think about the vision you have for your child and dream big. That's my advice. And once you have your vision, then you've got your team together and you can start working on the concrete next steps. So our first step was we wanted her to live in a home of her own. And in 2009, we had been living in our house 13 years, and we made the decision to take out all the equity in our home and invest it in a duplex. So we bought this duplex. It was like 2010 when we bought it, and we were able to rent it at market rate and use that rent to pay down the mortgage. So, you know, our equity in our house is not much, but there's a home for Karina. So it's 15 minutes from our home. We bought it in 2010, and like I said, we've been dedicating that rental income to the mortgage, insurance, and taxes. And because it's a duplex, we were able to get rental income before she moved in from both the upper unit and the lower unit. We're still getting rental income from the upper unit and the lower unit, but Karina and her friend are only able to pay $560 a month because that is what Social Security will give you for rent. So that's below market rate in Portland, so now we're not getting market rate on the upper unit, but we are still getting it on the lower unit. So it's still working financially. Karina and her friend, the way we did this is we established single room rental agreements, which include utilities. We had to do that because when Social Security decided whether or not to give Karina that $560 a month after she moved out of our home, we had to prove that she was solely responsible for her rent, and how did we figure in the utilities and all that. Social Security goes down that road with you. So the way that we were advised and that we proceeded was to develop single room rental agreements for her and her friend, and they're including utilities. And then the other thing we loved about the duplex is that it does give us opportunities to leverage housing for care, and we are doing that now. So Karina and Alicia live with a friend who was a teacher's assistant in their classroom, and she covers their sleep hours, and we do not pay her out of Karina's Medicaid waiver, but we let her live there for free. So she's getting housing in exchange for care. She does get to bill Medicaid when Karina is awake, but not when Karina's asleep. And so we're already leveraging that duplex for care hours. But in Oregon, the Medicaid plan that covers Karina is part of the Affordable Care Act expansion. It's called the K plan in Oregon. And the K plan funding is at risk. It's at risk. It's been reduced this year because Oregon had a deficit this year that they had to rectify. And of course, the Affordable Care Act is under assault. So our plan includes the flexibility of using that lower unit to potentially pay swing shift staff the same way we're paying the overnight staff, that they would be able to live there for free in exchange for care. And in Portland, rents are very high, so that's really attractive. I hope we don't have to do it, but we have the ability. So that's, for us, why a duplex made so much sense, and we're thrilled with this duplex. All right, so the next goal was a network of friends and building her community. I really started this freshman year when she first became interested in peers. From kindergarten through 8th grade, Karina could care less about peers. She only wanted adults who could help, say the ABCs and point to my thing that I like. But starting about freshman year, she started getting interested in peers, and particularly Alicia, who she now lives with. So I recruited the teachers and the classroom paraeducators to help me understand, who does she like? Who does she follow with her eyes? Who does she, sort of indicate interest with? And I started what was called Friends Group. So every Wednesday, I would take Karina and whatever friends I could fit in the minivan, and we would go bowling, and we would go to the park, and we would go to Waffle Window, and we would go to the mall. And it's a lot of work. I'm just gonna be really honest about that. But Karina has a group of friends, and they like spending time with Karina, and she likes spending time with them. So for me, building a friends group was an act that took a lot of persistence on my part, but it has totally paid off. And what I learned from friends group is that individuals with disabilities, young people with disabilities, are super socially isolated. I saw that when I was working in the group homes, and I see it today. Many of them, for whatever reason, their parents, it just seems so big to take a group of kids out into the community. And so they don't do it. So those kids sit at home every day. So social isolation is common amongst all her peers, and transportation is often a really basic challenge. Some of her friends have parents who also experience disability, and some of her friends just have parents who don't have a minivan. Transportation is a big problem, so getting people places was challenging. And what I had to do, as the sort of coach of Friends Group, was to identify activities where each participant could have fun and be well supported. And so that took a while, but here you can see Karina and her friends. This is a day that we're out at bowling, and they all like French fries, so everyone's gonna have at least some fun. Some of them like bowling more than others. Karina actually does not love bowling. I'm just gonna be super honest about it. She'll do it for 10 minutes, and she'll jump up and down when she sees the balls go down, and then she's really done. So actually, bowling is not Karina's favorite thing, but hanging out with her friends, eating French fries, and watching them and spending time with them is. So you have to just figure out what's the activity where everyone gets a moment that they really enjoy, because then they're gonna wanna come back on that activity. So that was how we built a network of friends for Karina. Her staff, she has 6 staff. Tim is actually one of her staff, and my other daughter, Sierra, is one of her staff. Because in Oregon, under the K plan, you can hire personal support workers, and they will be paid $14.50 an hour to provide supports. Oregon is a very loose state. Basically, you only have to be 18 and pass a criminal background check. I know state to state it's really different what the requirements are for personal support workers, so you have to look into that. But in Oregon, it's really loose. And Karina actually chooses her staff. And what I mean by that is that her staff have mostly come from the school system where she works, or friends of those people. And what I do, with her newest staff, one of her existing staff said, "Hey, I have a friend who might like to provide supports to Karina." I was like, "Great. I will pay for her to come all day and spend the day with Karina, and I will come at the end of the day." And then at the end of the day, I'm like, "Karina, did you have fun today?" And if Karina says yes, then it's a hire. And if Karina's like, all finished, or no, or just doesn't look interested, then it's not a hire. So Karina has voice in who she chooses for her staff. I do the formal hiring, all the paperwork, and there is paperwork. I train them. In Oregon, they don't have a formal training program, so I do the training. I supervise them, I schedule them, and I approve all their timesheets. And it is my second job. It's a lot of work. And so I'm just gonna be really honest. Karina lives in a home of her own, and I have 2 jobs. So I think I already explained that she has a live-in support worker who provides the overnight care. And that's the woman with Karina here on the left in the sunny sunshine. That's their backyard, having fun in the sun. And Karina comes home to us on weekends because we needed to create a situation where the live-in staff actually got some time off. So she has the house to herself on weekends, and she is 21, and she loves that. And we love having Karina come home to us because we love Karina. So it really is just the perfect blend where she's there 5 days a week, and she's home with us on the weekends. And Tim and Sierra are all employed as weekend PSWs, which for my 18-year-old who's going to college is a very good deal, $14.50 an hour. Now, Karina's roommate uses an agency, much like what Terry was describing with the in-home supports. There are agencies in Portland who provide in-home supports as well. And Alicia uses an agency. I haven't been thrilled, frankly, with the quality of the staff that agency has provided, and I am a little bit of a control freak. So for now, I'm gonna continue to hire them and train them and whatnot. But if there were to come a time, if I were to get ill or for whatever reason I wasn't available, we could contract with an agency and get in-home supports the same exact way that Terry's doing. All right, so in terms of Karina's daily activities, she has 1 year left in the transition program, and so this year will be all about identifying a supported day program for her. I've learned a lot from the parents who have walked this walk before me. And I know that if there's not a day program that really fits her needs, we could continue to just bill PSW hours and create a life for her. Deb Lindgren right there is like my mentor in creating a life for your child. That if you can't find a program that works, she's created an amazing life for Chad, and so I encourage everyone to talk to Deb. Sorry to put you on the spot. But right now, what her daily activities look like is that they go grocery shopping. The duplex is across the street from a large grocery store, so they truck over there, and Karina can choose, is today a chicken nugget day? Is today a burrito day? Like, what kind of day is it? And then she goes out in the community with her friends. You know, that's her and and Alicia and Luam up at Blue Lake Park, and there they are at Oaks Park. And they're out every single day. And we're at the place now where her staff just send me pictures. I don't even have to plan it. Like, I'm just at work and I'm getting these text messages. Oh, look, there's Karina having fun at the river. Oh, look, there's Karina having fun at the library. Like, they just do it because I empower them. And so our goal is for her to have a variety of meaningful activities, which she totally does. And ultimately, we want to find ways for Karina to contribute to her community. My dream is that we'll find a situation where Karina could join the Meals on Wheels program, and she and her support staff would get a little route, because Karina's so friendly that if there were some homebound seniors that liked Karina, that would be that's my next dream, because I dream big. And I have to say, we always take notes from the families who walked before us, and I've already called out Deb, and I'm going to call out the Karches who are going to present next, because they really taught me so many things that made this possible. So again, we needed Karina's medical needs to be well supported. I will tell you that this piece requires excellent communication. I'm a big-time texter, just ask any of my kids, and my staff are too, and that's a beautiful thing. So they're in touch with me all the time. Our biggest challenge, I think, really on the daily has not been the seizures, it's been the constipation. It's really hard to manage. Sometimes it goes well, but when it doesn't go well, it doesn't go well, and then seizures result. Karina definitely has an uptick in seizures when constipation gets on the scene, so we work and work and work on that. For the personal support workers, I would say that seizure supports are their biggest concern. We do train them in her seizure protocols. We show them videos of her seizures. And we tell them about SUDEP. We tell them about sudden unexpected death and epilepsy, because if it, God forbid, were to ever happen, I want them to know it's not their fault. So we're really honest with them, and we're like, yep, this is the shebang, and we're calm about it. And you know, there are so many things in this life that are outside of our control, and this is one of them. So we all do our best every day, and then we let it be. So much like Spencer, Karina requires all hands on deck if she's going to have a medical visit. So if we have a blood draw, it takes 5 of us. It takes 2 of us to physically restrain her. It takes a phlebotomist to restrain the shoulder, another phlebotomist to restrain the forearm, and a really freaking good phlebotomist to do the draw. This is Karina doing sedated dentistry. Like Spencer, she has to have full sedation because she simply cannot tolerate dentistry. And she lost a baby tooth and does not have a permanent tooth behind it. And when we went in the last time, we had the dentist actually look to see if there was enough bone there to put in an implant, and there's not. And so she could have bone grafts, like that's what typical people would do. They'd have bone grafts and get an implant, but we are not going to go there with Karina because it's just simply too many sedations, and she frankly doesn't care. I care, but she doesn't care, so we're not going to do that. So that's all I have about Karina. I am here and Tim is here, so if any of you have questions, please feel free to ask us. Like Spencer, I would say Karina is living a life that exceeded my wildest dreams when I was at my first Dupe 15Q conference, and I just want to say it is possible. It's possible. Thank you.
So I'm going to talk about the way that Rachel's community supports her. She lives in an intentional community, which I will explain in depth a little bit more. The picture on the left is them being playful. They are pretending they're a tree. And I would just like you to, it's called Arboretum co-housing, so that's a connection with trees, and I just hope you can spot Paul in that picture. And the picture on the right is a picture of Rachel and former and current caregivers and coaches, job coaches. So we're just showing you that there are lots of ways that Rachel has community. Now we, unlike the Clearys, we would never claim that we were the best. I mean, Nicole's not claiming this, but you saw what a great planner Nicole is. She would never put herself forward like that. But we often say to ourselves, as Nicole just said, Rachel is living such a much more inclusive life than we could ever have imagined. And we thought she was living a pretty good life before, but this is so far beyond our dreams. And it's not because we planned it carefully. It's because we stumbled on things that were fortunate for us and for her. So first of all, when about 10 years ago, when we had an opportunity, when Rachel finished school, we thought, oh, we don't have to stay in Appleton, Wisconsin anymore. We can move to Madison, the capital, and I can go to the university. So we moved. And it turns out that Madison is an extremely inclusive city. We thought Appleton was great, but Madison is 100 times more, and the key to that is a professor who's now retired of special ed called Lou Brown, and he pioneered inclusion in schools. So if any of your kids have ever been included in schools, you can thank Lou Brown. And then he, after got that going, he thought, well, then people should be included in life after they're out of school. And so Madison is an extremely inclusive community. They have the highest supported employment rate for individuals with a disability, the second highest rate in the country in Dane County, just because they really believe that individuals with disabilities deserve to live the life they want, how they want, and they should be out in the workforce. We also stumbled across this whole co-housing thing. Ironically, we had read an article about co-housing before Rachel was even born. So we kind of knew what that word meant, and Paul and Rachel were just walking in our neighborhood, and they went walking past a corner, and it said, Arboretum co-housing, 1 unit left. And Paul came home and he said, I think we need to buy that unit. So we did actually not buy that exact unit. We ended up buying a different one. But I'll explain that in a little bit. And then the other thing that we're very fortunate about is the University of Wisconsin, which is a very large state university, right there about a mile from Rachel's house. So we have a lot of access to really great staff who are students at the university. So the things that we really wanted in the big picture for Rachel was a good place to live in a good location. And location for us was, the key is being on a bus line that's close to the university and only 9 blocks from our house. And again, we thought we would be buying Rachel a duplex in one of the suburbs of Madison. We have very dear friends who built a duplex on a corner, so that it's only attached through the garage, and they live in one unit, and eventually, they haven't quite managed it yet, but the idea is that Michael will live in the other unit with his caregiver. So that duplex idea is a great one, and that's kind of what we thought we would be doing, but then we stumbled on the co-housing. And the staff that we've gotten has been great. One thing that Madison has is a program called Rehabilitation Psychology, which is, as you might imagine, helping people with disabilities live fuller lives. And of course, they're primarily active with helping returning vets who have injuries or people who've suffered strokes or whatever, but they also work with people with disabilities. So for a while, all of Rachel's caregivers, all 5 of them, were rehab psych majors. Over time, as Nicole said, they recruit each other, and so over time, we now have a whole medical team, which is a good thing because Rachel had a lot of medical issues this past year. So now they're all either pre-PA, pre-nursing, something like that, and more into the medical sciences. In terms of employee relationships, as Nicole said, if you train your own staff, and particularly in Wisconsin or in our county, if you train your own staff, then you can, and hire them directly and supervise them yourself and don't use an agency, you can pay them more. And so that trade-off for us is very important. Also that personal connection and knowing, and we tell them, you're entering our family now when we hire you. And a lot of them, we just went and visited one in Arizona with her 2 children, and one just came home from Denver and visited us with her 2 children. So they really do stay parts of Rachel's life and our life after they've worked for us. And in terms of friends and community, that's very important, but unlike Marina, Rachel does not really care about other people, and Paul was going to say that whole I want thing, what we say Rachel wants, it's really what we want, because Rachel, if she had her choice, would just live with Paul and me and not have anybody else bother her, because she particularly loves her dad, and she likes our undivided attention. But what we want for her, which we feel is important, is friends and community. So the community that she lives in, Arboretum Co-housing, provides her with 80-plus people who all know her name, who all greet her, who look out for her. And so while she doesn't have friends, she has her community, and she also has all her caregivers. Of course, when we first were hiring them, were her same age. Now that she's almost 31, she's 10 years older than most of her caregivers. But still, they provide, they make sure that, as her sister says, I don't dress her like a geek. They take care of making sure that she looks stylish and good, and people would not be saying that I'm treating her like a child. So this is just a couple of views of Arboretum Co-housing. There are 2 large apartment units on which you see here on the left, and they have units of different sizes, 1, 2, 3 bedrooms. And then Rachel, there are 5 or 6 freestanding homes that are also part of it. So on the left you see, or on the right you see Rachel's house. That's the side entrance to it. And the idea is that it's a Danish idea. Anybody from the Pacific Northwest, co-housing's big also in the Northwest, and in Denver too, I think, and some places in the East. But anyway, the idea is you create a community on a city block. And you want to have a whole range of ages and incomes and interests. So at Arboretum Co-housing, we have 4 one-year-olds and 3 80-year-olds, and everything in between. We have 1 3-generation family. We have a lot of people who are retired. We also have people who are still working. We have probably 15 school-age children. Unfortunately, most of them are little boys. I don't know why, but that's what happened. We have some single moms. And you can see how the support of the community is helpful to them. There's another shot of Rachel's house from the front, and then you see a lot of people from the community gathered because they're dedicating a little free library there in the middle, which has been painted to look like Rachel's house. It has 2 bedrooms for Rachel and a housemaid, and then it has a caregiver suite. So like the Clearys, we have that housing which we offer in exchange for the overnight care, although our overnight caregivers are paid minimum wage. But again, the room and board and especially in a rent market like Madison, is a really big thing. So people are very happy to have that job. And like the Clearys, we bring Rachel home on the weekends so that they can have some space. We do not take pay for the weekend, because that's kind of the trade-off we made to make sure that Rachel is not too expensive and that they'll keep supporting her, because our goal is not to get as much, not that anybody is trying to do this, but our goal is not to get her completely supported by the state, but instead just to make sure she's on the radar if anything happens to us, that supports will be in place for her. We had to completely redo the house. It was about 85 years old, and had no insulation and all of that. And so we redid it, and Rachel really loves her house. She's okay coming home on the weekends, but she really likes to be at her house. And it's a great place to have a Midwest gathering, which we did a couple of years ago. And that's the back of Rachel's house, that big green playing field for the kids. And you might recognize some 15Q families there. The community has a lot of community space. The apartments are not real large, the idea being that you would spend time in common space. They have guest rooms, they have laundry rooms, they have a private dining room. There's a large kitchen and a huge dining area where most people have put their dining room tables from before because they don't have room for them in their apartments. There's a music room, a media room, and then there are lots of community events. So we try to have meals together once or twice a week. I do a lot of that cooking because I like it. It's just done on a volunteer basis, and you just sign up for the meal if you like the menu. Rachel's not in this picture, but she could be because she goes pretty much to all the meals. It's great for her caregivers because there's a meal they don't have to prepare. Yes, Nicole. Oh, thanks. And they also can have time talking to other people. And that, Nicole mentioned that social isolation, and that's one of the things that's been really wonderful about this community for Rachel and for her caregivers, because we could have bought a little house for her anywhere and set her up there with her caregivers. She has 5 who come alternate through the day, and they would be completely isolated. They would have no interaction with anybody. And here instead, she's in a community where she regularly has meals with other people, where they have a place to walk her in the winter. They can go down and walk in the parking garage. They can go up and down the stairs in the big buildings. And then she has a job in the community because everyone is expected to contribute to the community. So her job is those who wish order organic eggs from an egg farm, and they get delivered on Wednesday. And Rachel's job is to deliver those eggs to the people who ordered them. And again, she gets to ring their doorbell, greet them, they say hi to her, and it works out great, and that's a contribution she can make to the community. The community also has other things like concerts. They have annual blood drives. You can maybe spot me in that picture of the blood drive. And then Rachel works. And this is probably the thing that has most astounded us, and it's a direct result of living in Madison. Rachel operates on the level of a toddler, and yet she goes to work every day in a regular office building in the State Department of Natural Resources. And Rachel does secure shredding. So when you fill out a hunting or fishing license and put your social security number on there, Rachel makes sure that that does not get out into the public. And she will not reveal any of your personal information to anyone. And she loves to shred, and she tells people she has work to do. She loves to greet people. She has tremendous job coaching support she needs, obviously somebody with her all the time. But because she's there in that office, the job coaching agency was able to add another person to work there, another person with disabilities who doesn't need the level of support that Rachel does. So her being there then makes it possible for someone else with disabilities to work there, and that's that Madison commitment to people having supported employment. And again, if you had asked us, even when she was 18, could Rachel have a real job and get a paycheck? We were like, no way. And yet this job is more suited to her abilities than her sheltered workshop was in Appleton, where they wanted her to do little things and wear a hairnet, and nah, she wasn't good with that. This is her case manager, also with her at work. And then here are some of her former caregivers on the right from several years ago, but you'll notice the same one in both pictures. That's because she worked for us for 6 years. That's a fairly recent picture of her and Rachel on the merry-go-round. And she eventually became the live-in caregiver. She got married. We had not thought we'd have men in the house, but we let the husband move in too. Family is also a real important support to Rachel, so she's there with her sister who lives nearby, lives a distance away, but comes home often, and then showing her Badger pride with her dad and her brother and sister-in-law. Rachel is always Tigger for Halloween, and I don't know if you can spot Paul in that picture. But somehow this other one got off. But then Monica, her longtime caregiver, and Monica's little girl got into the system and became Kanga and Rue this year. So there's Rachel with Rue. And that's because we had this unexpected bonus in that Monica and Joe had a baby, Adelie, and she lived with Rachel for about 18 months. And Rachel adored her, as you can see. And we miss her so much that we invite her back for dinner on Wednesday nights. It's completely cute. So going back to this picture, these are, on Rachel's 30th birthday, we invited all her former caregivers and job coaches to come, and this is probably only a third of them. And they range in age from 40 down to probably 20. And there are a lot of babies in that picture, so apparently we didn't discourage anybody from having children. And this is, what makes it possible for Rachel, we always say, is this big community of support. Thank you.
So we actually took up pretty much the whole hour and a half that we were allotted. We are happy to take questions. There is a break. So if people have questions, we could take, one or two before the break starts, but then I'm happy to keep going through the break. Oh, we still have a half an hour. Oh, we have a half an hour. You guys can ask all kinds of crazy questions. They have asked that if you have a question, please use the mic, or else I'm going to have to repeat it just to make sure that they're getting it for the recording. So does anybody have questions? Come on up.
Hi, all of you are from different geographic states, I assume. And I want to know if your state services were friendly, accessible, or was it a real battle, and how did you undertake that? Because in the state of Missouri, where I'm from, the money is really guarded, and you have to make your loved one sound almost like a monster, and you're going to abandon them type thing. So it's been very disheartening, and there are a lot of families that are not willing to go through this process. So could you address that?
Yeah, I can address it quickly for Oregon, and then Terry or Ann and Paul can address it for their states. So when the Affordable Care Act was passed, Oregon got the K plan, the Medicaid waiver. And because it was so new to Oregon, before that, Oregon had no services. But the K plan came into effect shortly before Karina's 18th birthday. And so in Oregon, the way it works is the supported individuals have an annual needs assessment. And that annual needs assessment determines what their service hours will be. And I play that thing up. There's nobody more constipated with worse seizures and more choking than Karina when you talk to me, because that's how I get the hours. I know how you play the game. I'm totally willing to do that, and her case manager's entirely friendly about it. Karina doesn't actually have behaviors, but a lot of kids have behaviors, but right when she's in a post-ictal state, right after a seizure, she can actually be fairly violent to herself and others. I play that up for as much as it's worth, and we end up with, at the moment, we have 15 hours a day of support for Karina, which is why we have to do that leveraging to have the overnight staff, because we don't have enough hours. But in Oregon, her case managers have always told me, you better use every single hour you're allotted, or you're at risk of losing them in future needs assessments. And that's why Tim and that's why Sierra provide supports on the weekend. So unlike Ann and Paul, we've been advised by our caseworker, use every single hour you can, because that's how you establish need. And as budgets come down, which they are, I expect to have less hours for Karina this year. When we do her annual needs assessment in September, I expect we'll have less hours. But for us, the process is just, you meet with the case manager, you have the annual needs assessment. In Karina's roommate's case, her case manager gave her way less hours. So we appealed. There's an appeal process. They sent what's called a state RIT person. I don't even remember what the RIT acronym stands for, but they came and did a reassessment, and the hours went up. So it's that annual needs assessment that determines the hours that you get in Oregon. And so I can't speak to California or Wisconsin.
I would say the thing in Wisconsin is it has been changing. So in the probably through the late 90s, early 2000s, it was a very comprehensive and pretty generous system. You did not have to fight to get in. People who were 21 just got in. Now the services were fairly like segregated workshops, adult day centers. They didn't have this inclusion stuff. That was a Madison and Dane County push, and the counties through about 2003 had a lot of control over it. We got lucky, again, in that when we lived in Appleton, Appleton is not a very big town, it's only 80,000 people, but parts of it are in 3 different counties. And we lived in it was mostly a rural county, it just had a little bit of Appleton in it, and so Rachel got into the system. If we had lived in Madison when she turned 21, she wouldn't have gotten in, she would have been on a wait list for 8 years. So, and we knew that, people in Appleton knew that, and I kept telling people, you should move from Outagamie County to Calumet County, just move 6 blocks, And it's funny how many people don't want to manipulate the system that much, but we happen to live in Calumet County. But the other thing I would say is just two thoughts on kind of the working with the system. I totally understand Nicole's argument. You want to push it to the max, and that may be a good strategy, and maybe we have to switch to that strategy. What we did, it was a little bit different, because in my mind, there's always a budget back there somewhere. There's not supposed to be. Typically, the law says your kid gets what they need, but there's always a budget. There's a budget somewhere. And so we looked at it and said, you know what, we can save 25% off the top by doing the hiring ourselves and then pay people more, because that's a big load. The agency for hiring, firing, personnel kinds of issues, fill in, that's one of the most expensive parts of it, is to having people available, and we said, we'll do that. People can't show up, we'll do it, because we live close enough. That's part of how it worked. We almost never have to, because we have so many. If you have 4 or 5, they can usually fill in for each other. If you only have 1 or 2, you're going to have misses. And I had one other thought. Just to show you the way things are different from state to state, our original idea was that our overnight caregiver, we wouldn't have to pay for those hours. The housing would do it. But under Wisconsin wage and hour law, you cannot do it that way. You have to pay. If there's any chance that the person has to work during the shift, you have to pay them. And of course, the whole point of them is that Rachel gets up in the night. So is there a chance they're going to have to get up? Oh, you bet. And so I guess that's it. Yeah, I'd say, I know what I was going to say. But the system is changing in Wisconsin. Money's getting tighter. They kind of shuffled up the system to give the state more power. And so sometimes you have to fight harder than others. It's definitely not the way it was 20 years ago. Now you have to fight for these services a little bit, but you can get them, and you can usually find allies. You may have noticed quite a few Badger shirts in our pictures, but the one where there was just the woman and Rachel both wearing Rachel's caseworker is very helpful in helping us work the system. She's very enthusiastic fan of Rachel's.
In California, we have the regional center system, and it's covered under the Landerman Act. And a few years ago, about 6 or 7 years ago, they did make some changes in the Landerman Act, and people were totally up in arms. One of the things they paid for was overnight camping, which was great. Spencer went camping, and he loved camping. But the Landerman Act covers, covers everything. And but there's always the but. They don't give you a list of things and say these are all the things you can have. You have to kind of, through your caseworker, you kind of have to go through the system to get what you need for your child. And one of the biggest things was protection, to keep him safe. And whenever I had whenever I met with a regional center, I always told them what was going on with him. As either there was a year he had seizures and he fell down and he was in the emergency room and cut his head open. So now he needed more care during that period of time. Another time he actually ran in front of a car and almost got hit by a car. And I was right there. I screamed bloody murder, and the car stopped, and I made sure my regional center person knew about that. Every time I got Spencer out of the car, he would go street, and so his safety was imperiled at that point. I made sure the regional center knew about that, and because it's the protective services that where the hours really came from. I mentioned in-home health services, which when I had him with me after he had turned 18, before he lived with Will, I had 188 hours. Today, Will's wife is his in-home health service provider. She has 257 hours. And one of the things for me to have PALS and to have him in supportive services, I actually had I had a lawyer advocate help me get the hours. The regional center has said no to me all throughout Spencer's schooling. I've got respite, I've got after-school care, I got all that kind of stuff. They always said no to me, and I never accepted no. And I always went one step further, and I always ended up getting exactly what I wanted. And I knew that there might be some negotiation, and I always said to myself, this is what I want, if that's acceptable. A lot of times they gave me more than I was willing. I would have compromised a little bit more, but I never took no for an answer. I just always, I've been in mediations, I've been in, finally in the regional center, they hired a person who wasn't a lawyer, so you could take your case to them, and they always said yes to me. So once they always said yes, when they said no, I go, nope, not acceptable, I'm going further, and I always got what I wanted. So that's how it works with the regional center. Just don't let them say no and believe that that's as far as you can go. That's it, thanks.
I just wanted to add that it's a pretty easy thing to document what life is like for your child, because we have video options on our cell phones. And I would just recommend that as a little exercise, instead of having to portray your child as a monster, to portray your child as needing a lot of care in the way that Nicole said. The other sort of option you may want to work is to try and enlist your state legislators to understand this. You can make a little video, put it on YouTube, send it to them. You can also invite them to come and see what life is like. And Rachel actually has taken her legislators to work with her to show kind of that people with disabilities can have jobs and contribute. And the most amazing thing is when she does, all of her regular coworkers pour out of their cubicles and collar the legislator and tell them how much they value having Rachel in their workplace, which that says more than anything, and it's not coming from us. We also had the opportunity to meet our U.S. Senator recently, and she said that she had been to a gathering of parents in Milwaukee where they stood up and told their stories and their children's stories, and she said it was very powerful. So that's another thing that you might be able to do, is just gather a group of families and kind of tell stories in the way that we've kind of done it here, but emphasizing what your children's needs are. And Medicaid is in jeopardy, and Medicaid is how most of our children will be funded in their adult lives, how their services will be covered. So we really need to advocate for why that we need that.
I was wondering if you guys could talk a little bit about what you have in place or what options are in place for oversight. You've hired these great people, you've put a lot of effort into determining who's going to be with your child. How do you then make sure that you've made the right decision? How do you then try to ensure that there's not going to be abuse or neglect? Is there anything else on top of that people can do?
So for us, the answer is me, the supervisor. I mean, I see myself sort of as a supervisor, but the things that I do is I absolutely am texting with her staff every day. I don't think that a shift goes by. Maybe Jordan's shift, that overnight shift, but otherwise, not a shift goes by where I'm not like, hey, what are you guys doing today? I am the queen of the unannounced visit, just showing up at the house, because I'm really friendly, and but I'm looking. Is the house clean? Is Karina's laundry done? Is there food in the fridge? Like, I'm looking at all that stuff, and part of that is because I did spend a year overseeing 6 group homes, and so I know what to look for. But it requires your engagement. We are not done with Karina. Karina is not over there somewhere, and we're living our lives over here somewhere. We are living our lives with constant monitoring, constant support, constant planning, constant engagement over here. I have more personal freedom than I have ever had in my life, and I have a second job. It is not nothing. So for me, it's all of that. It's the frequent texts, it's the drop-in visits, it's the critical eye when I'm in the home. I go to the home when none of them are there all the time. I just drop in because it's 15 minutes from our house. So if I'm going somewhere and the home is there, and then, they act as a team pretty much, but I am always like, if somebody has a concern, they generally bring it to me. If one of the staff has a concern about what the other staff is doing, they generally tell me because they really are all on Karina's team and they all want the best for Karina. And so I am not above like, oh, really? What did you see that staff do? It just takes active daily engagement for us. That's how we assure Karina's safety.
We also drop in a lot, and we tell them that before we hire them, that we'll be stopping by. We have a dog who needs a walk every morning. Rachel lives 9 blocks away, so often I'll walk over. Often I have something that they need that I'm bringing over to them. I usually warn them if it's in the morning that I'm on my way, just because I think that's polite, or if it's on the weekend when we normally wouldn't be there. But we also just drop in. The other thing is that our overnight caregiver is, we call her the house manager. She's not really the supervisor of the other young women, but we let them know that she does the scheduling for the month. She makes sure all the shifts are assigned to people. And then we ask her, we sort of say that in exchange for her room and board, she gives us 10 hours a week. And some of that time is spent getting the schedule straight for the next month, or filling Rachel's pill boxes, which is another one of her jobs for the week. But some of that time we say, would you please have a meal with each of the caregivers and Rachel, which helps make sure that people are talking to Rachel and that there are more people around. And would you also just check in with them every week, make sure they're not struggling, make sure they don't have things they need. And then she also is responsible for making sure the shopping lists are out, and she makes sure everybody has timesheets. I, like Nicole, have to check over the timesheets. But we just, and then that they also know they're a team and they work together. And then we have a house meeting usually once a semester where we just kind of go over things. And if there are crises, Rachel ended up in the hospital last fall for 7 days on a ventilator. It was very bad. And that was a really traumatic experience. And then it took her a long time to recover from having been sedated for so long. So we had a lot more back and forth with everybody trying to find out what was best for Rachel. And we also have the constipation issues that we're constantly monitoring as well. So they sort of know that we're all working on this together, and we all sort of agree on the ones who are maybe not doing the best, and we just kind of ease them out, and everybody understands that.
For me and Spencer, PALS does all of that. And Will works with PALS, and he's my son's caregiver, and he could probably answer how they monitor the people they hire and whatever. But one of the things, Will's known Spencer since he was 9 years old. So Spencer's like a little brother to him. So then he hires the people through PALS. And most of the people, except for one that work with him, have known him since he was a very young child. But as far as how they monitor at PALS, if you guys are interested in, the California parents, you can come and talk to Will, or Diego's here too, who both work at PALS.
Just quickly, because you've covered it a little bit, but I'm wondering if you could share what you look for when you're hiring someone. I know I do a lot of hiring of staff, but I'm always looking for other things to make sure I'm hiring the right person. Thank you.
So we've been fortunate that most of the staff for Karina initially came to us through being paraeducators in her classroom. Karina's most favorite staff, if you're a Facebook friend, you'll see her. She's the one with the dreadlocks. Actually came to me one day and said, I just love Karina so much. Do you ever need respite workers? And I was like, oh my God, there is a God in heaven. But what I look for is people who clearly, the difference between Karina's staff, let's just do this, between Karina's staff and the people who we used to hire at the group home. is that the people in the group home were there as a job. We were constantly on them to get off their goddamn phone, and interact with the clients because they were there. They saw their job as keep them safe, keep them fed, don't let a disaster happen. That's what they saw their job as. Karina's staff really see and are excited about this young woman should have a full life. This young woman should be at the park and be at the mall and go to the pet store and touch the fish tank 5,000 times because it brings her joy. I look for someone who resonates with Karina's joy. That is my number one criteria. If you can stand next to Karina and go, W is for watch, W is for watch, W is for watch, and be as excited on the third try as you were on the first, then I might hire you. Because you resonate with her joy, and Karina is so joyful. And so it's somebody who really sees our vision for Karina and having a full life, who really resonates with her joy, who doesn't get annoyed by the repetitiveness of Karina's interests, because Karina will perseverate on whatever it is. At the moment, it is a Teletubby video, and it's got a little clip-it in Russian, and Tim and me and Sierra, we're all like, oh my God, not again with the Russian. But, you have to be able to take that and be able to tolerate it, and be able to mediate. Sometimes her housemate gets annoyed with the repetitiveness, so it's also mediating Karina's relationships. And being able to introduce Karina. The big difference between her staff and the staff that I used to supervise at the group homes is that these staff, if Karina's interested in someone and goes and touches their baseball cap, which she does all the time, my staff are perfectly comfortable in saying, hi, modeling for Karina. Say hi, you want to touch his hat because you like hats, and they're mediating her relationships with strangers in the community, and they're doing it joyfully and acceptingly, and you know what? People are generally kind, is what I experience, but people don't know how to deal with difference. And so her staff mediate that beautifully, ongoing, every day. Staff in the group homes would be like, don't do that, Paul. Don't do that. Like, that would have been their approach. And Karina's staff are like, oh, you want to touch his hat? Because it says, whatever, C-U-B-S. You love those letters, don't you, Karina? And then the hat owner is usually pretty tolerant about letting her touch the C-U-B-S. So for me, those are the criteria. I'm looking for someone who really sees the joy, appreciates the vision, and has the skill, the interpersonal skills themselves, to be able to help Karina interact with the world and help the world interact with Karina and appreciate her joy, because Karina is a joyful being who was put on this earth to bring joy. And it's just not everybody can see it or appreciate it, but they can with a little help, and her staff are that help.
So I just pulled up my job description for Rachel's caregivers, and here's what I have for qualifications. Previous experience working with people with disabilities is preferable but not required. And I'd have to say that a couple of her caregivers had absolutely no experience with people with disabilities, and they turned into great caregivers. We will train you and support you in the beginning weeks. And always after we hire somebody, we require them to shadow for 10 hours. So at least 2 shifts, usually 3, meaning they're working with one of the caregivers who already works there, and we try to schedule them with as many of them as we can because we feel they train each other, and they all have different ways of working with Rachel, so it's good to get that perspective. I'll tell you later about a disaster with that, but it usually works. And we pay them separately then for their time, so they know we value their time because obviously the currently working caregivers are getting paid. And then dependability, responsibility, compassion, energy, and a cheerful attitude. That's what we ask for. So they know that ahead of time, and we hold them to that. We did have one caregiver who was training another, and Rachel had a pretty bad accident. And the working caregiver said to the new one, I don't do poop. And she made the new one clean up everything, which was not great, but she stayed on with the job. So I guess it all came out all right in the end, and it was a pretty good example of what could happen. So.
I personally don't hire the support staff. I leave that up to pals and Will and Diego and the people that know him really well. But what I do know is that Spencer is very challenging at first. he tests you like crazy. And then once you've finally taken control, then he's okay. And Will's had some caregivers that have to call him up all day long. Spencer just did this, Spencer just did that. So it is a challenge, and I'm really appreciative that I have someone who knows my son very well and can take care of those things.